The barber shop on 116th Street had been there longer than most of the men who walked through its door. The chairs were worn smooth from decades of use. The mirrors were spotted with age. The smell of pomade and aftershave hung thick in the air, mixing with the sound of scissors and low conversation. It was the kind of place where a man could sit down and disappear for a while, wrapped in the ordinary rhythm of a Tuesday afternoon. Ellsworth Johnson didn't need the haircut. He'd been in 3 days before. But routine was survival in his world, and survival meant being predictable only to those he trusted. The barber had cut his hair for years, had known him when he was just a kid running numbers in the neighborhood, had seen him grow into something bigger, something feared and respected in equal measure. The barber's hands were steady. His mouth stayed shut. That kind of loyalty was worth more than gold in Harlem. The barber's name was Malcolm. Thin man, quiet eyes, careful fingers. He had a wife who was sick. Medical bills stacking up like gravestones. A daughter in a nursing program uptown needing tuition. The kind of weight that bends a man's spine over time, makes him think about things he wouldn't normally think about, makes him measure what he owes against what he needs, makes him wonder if loyalty can be sold, if the price is high enough. Malcolm had gotten a phone call 2 nights before, a voice he didn't recognize. Calm, professional, not threatening, just clear. They knew about his wife. They knew about the bills. They knew his daughter's name and where she studied. They didn't say what would happen if he refused. They didn't need to. They just told him what they wanted, where Bumpy would be, what time, how long he usually stayed, and they told him what they'd give him in return. Enough to cover everything. Enough to stop drowning. Malcolm had stood in his kitchen after that call, phone still in his hand, staring at nothing. His wife coughed from the bedroom. The sound rattled through the apartment like dice in a cup. He thought about Bumpy's face, the way he always tipped well, the way he asked about Malcolm's family, like he actually cared. But he also thought about the stack of bills on the table. The way his wife's breathing had gotten worse. The look in his daughter's eyes when he told her he didn't know if he could keep paying for school. He'd made his choice. Not out of greed, out of desperation. The kind that eats at a man's insides until there's nothing left but the decision itself. When Bumpy walked into the shop that Tuesday, Malcolm's hands shook for the first time in 30 years. Just a tremor, barely visible. But there, Bumpy sat in the chair like he always did, head tilted back, eyes half closed. He talked about the weather, about the neighborhood, about nothing important. Malcolm draped the cape around his shoulders and picked up the scissors. His mouth was dry. His heart hammered against his ribs. Outside, a black car idled at the corner. 2 men inside, waiting, watching the door. Malcolm worked slowly. Normally he could finish in 20 minutes. Today he stretched it to 35. Every snip of the scissors felt like a countdown. Every stroke of the razor felt like betrayal taking shape. Bumpy didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't say anything. He just sat there, trusting, the way a man trusts someone who's been part of his life for years. When it was done, Bumpy stood, brushed the loose hair from his shoulders, and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a fold of bills and handed Malcolm twice what the cut cost. Their eyes met in the mirror for just a second. Malcolm looked away first. Bumpy smiled, said he'd see him next week, and walked toward the door. Malcolm watched him go, watched him step out onto the sidewalk. Watched the black car pull forward. Watched the door open. Watched Bumpy turn, recognition flashing across his face too late. Watched him pulled inside. Watched the car drive away. The shop was silent. Malcolm stood there with the money still in his hand, feeling its weight, feeling everything it represented and everything it had cost. He thought about calling someone, thought about running, thought about pretending he didn't know. But he just stood there, frozen, staring at the empty chair. Bumpy had known them. The men in the car, not friends, but familiar. Faces from the other side of the business. The kind of men who smile with their mouths but not their eyes. The kind who shake your hand while measuring you for a grave. There had been tension for months. Territory disputes. Money disagreements. The usual dance of power and pride that men in their world performed until someone decided the music had to stop. They drove him to a warehouse on the waterfront. The kind of building that had been abandoned so long it didn't even have graffiti anymore. Just empty windows and rust. Inside, the air was cold. The floor was concrete. The walls absorbed sound like they'd been waiting for this moment. They didn't hurt him right away. They talked, asked questions, wanted names, wanted to know who he trusted, wanted to understand his network so they could dismantle it. Bumpy sat in a metal chair, hands bound behind him, and said nothing. His face was calm, not defiant, not afraid, just present. Like he'd always known this moment would come and had made peace with it long before he walked into Malcolm's shop. One of the men, older, gray at the temples, leaned against a table and lit a cigarette. He spoke quietly, almost kindly. Told Bumpy this didn't have to be hard. Told him there was a way out if he cooperated. Told him about deals they could make, understandings they could reach. The words floated in the cold air like smoke, and Bumpy listened without reacting. When the man finished, Bumpy finally spoke. His voice was steady. "You think I don't know what this is?" The man with the cigarette tilted his head. "Then why'd you come?" Bumpy looked at him for a long moment. "Because a man I trusted called me there." The words hung between them. Heavy. Final. The older man took a drag from his cigarette and nodded slowly, like he understood something he didn't want to understand. Like he recognized the particular kind of pain that comes from betrayal. He looked at the others, and something passed between them, without being spoken. A decision made in silence. They put him in the freezer 2 hours later. Industrial. Big enough to hold half a cow, the kind used in meatpacking plants before they closed down and left the neighborhood to rot. It wasn't running anymore, but the walls were thick, and the temperature inside was barely above freezing. They left him there, bound, alone, and they walked away. Malcolm heard about it the next morning. Word traveled fast in Harlem, faster than the police, faster than the newspapers. Someone found the body. Someone always does. Malcolm was opening the shop when a kid from the block ran past, shouting to his friends. Malcolm's hands froze on the key. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. He went inside and sat in the same chair where Bumpy had sat the day before. He stared at himself in the mirror and tried to find the man he used to be. Tried to find the version of himself who believed loyalty mattered, who believed some things couldn't be bought. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who'd made a choice and would have to live with it every day for the rest of his life. His wife's medical bills got paid. His daughter stayed in school. The money came through like they promised. Malcolm used it. Because what else could he do? Refusing it wouldn't bring Bumpy back, wouldn't undo what he'd done. So he took it and felt it burn in his hands every time he touched it. The shop stayed open. People still came for haircuts. But Malcolm noticed something change. The way men looked at him. The way conversations stopped when he entered a room. The way his hands, once so steady, now trembled just slightly every time he picked up the scissors. Nobody said anything directly. Nobody accused him, but everyone knew. In a neighborhood like that, everybody always knows. Bumpy's funeral was on a Saturday. Half of Harlem showed up. Malcolm stayed away. He told himself it was out of respect. Told himself his presence would be an insult to the dead. But the truth was simpler and uglier than that. He stayed away because he couldn't bear to see what he'd done reflected in other people's faces. Couldn't bear to stand among the mourners and pretend to grieve when he was the reason they were grieving. His daughter called him a week later. She was excited. Told him about her classes, about the internship she'd gotten at a hospital downtown, about the future she was building. Malcolm listened and felt proud and sick at the same time. Proud of her. Sick at what he'd done to make it possible. She had no idea. Would never know. And he would carry that secret until the day he died, along with the weight of a man's life traded for tuition money and medical bills. The men who killed Bumpy were never caught. The police asked questions, but nobody answered. That was how it worked. That was how it always worked. Justice in that world didn't come from courtrooms or badges. It came from understanding. From consequences that unfolded over time in ways the law couldn't touch or measure. Malcolm aged fast after that. His hair went white within a year. His back bent. His eyes hollowed out. People said it was stress. Said it was the long hours. Said it was age catching up. But the old women who sat on stoops and watched the neighborhood breathe knew better. They saw the weight he carried. They saw the way guilt eats a man from the inside, slow and relentless, until there's nothing left but the shell. He kept cutting hair, kept opening the shop every morning, kept going through the motions of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. But late at night, when the shop was dark and the street was quiet, he'd sit in that chair and stare at his reflection. And sometimes, just for a second, he'd see Bumpy sitting there instead. Head tilted back, eyes half closed, trusting. The neighborhood moved on. New people came, old people died. The shop stayed the same, a relic of another time. Malcolm stayed too, locked in place by what he'd done, by the choice he'd made, by the 30 pieces of silver that bought his daughter's future and cost him his soul. Years later, when his daughter graduated and became a nurse, she invited him to the ceremony. He sat in the crowd and watched her walk across the stage, watched her smile, watched her hold her diploma high. And he felt everything at once: pride, love, horror, shame. The knowledge that her success was built on a dead man's body, that her joy was purchased with blood money, that he'd traded one life for another and would never be able to reconcile the math. She hugged him afterward, told him she couldn't have done it without him, told him he was the best father in the world. And Malcolm held her and said nothing, because what could he say? How could he explain that the price of her happiness was a man frozen and forgotten in a warehouse by the waterfront? How could he tell her that every time he looked at her, he saw Bumpy's face in the mirror? He couldn't. So he smiled, told her he was proud, let her believe the lie. Because that's what fathers do. They carry the weight so their children don't have to. Malcolm died on a Thursday. Heart attack. Quick. The shop closed permanently after that. His daughter inherited what little he had. She never knew the full story. Never knew about the phone call or the choice or the black car idling at the corner. She just knew her father had worked hard and loved her. and made sacrifices so she could have a better life. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that's all any story ever is. People making impossible choices with incomplete information, trying to protect what they love while the world demands payment in blood and loyalty and silence. Maybe there are no villains, just people in pain, doing what they think they have to do, and living with the consequences until the weight finally crushes them. The chair where Bumpy sat still exists somewhere, sold to another shop, repaired and reupholstered, used by other men who have no idea of its history. And maybe that's how it should be. Maybe objects don't carry memory the way people do. Maybe guilt is the only inheritance that truly lasts. But on certain nights, when the city is quiet and the old ghosts walk, you can still feel it. The weight of that Tuesday. The silence in the shop. The sound of scissors cutting hair. The image of a man walking out a door toward a car he won't walk away from. And somewhere in the dark, the echo of a question nobody wants to answer. What would you trade? What would you sell? And when the bill comes due, what would be left of you to pay it?